I notice you're all looking a little puzzled, and I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, wow, does her hair always look like that? Yeah, pretty much I'm having a bad hair life. No, that's not what you're thinking. You're thinking she plays wheelchair basketball. Where is her wheelchair? Valid question. It's right here. See, it even has my name on the back of it, Tiana Tozer. 70% of the people who play wheelchair basketball are walking woundeds. Because I can't run or jump, I'm allowed to use the wheelchair adaptation. Anytime we make a judgment about somebody based on a physical characteristic or one thing on their resume, even their religion, we are missing out on all the other potential that they might bring to the table. Our society bombards us with this idea that the most important thing in your life is what you look like. Bull. The most important thing in your life is who you are inside, here and here, and the choices that you're making in this life. 1 in 5 Americans is a person with a disability. We are the fastest growing minority in the United States. 1 in 3 Americans will experience a disability in their lifetime. Disability is the only minority you can join at any time. Now, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and be Black, Hispanic, or Asian unless you already are. But you could wake up tomorrow and be disabled. It happens like that. I joined this minority on May 14th, 1988. I was a sophomore at the University of Oregon, and I'd just been accepted to the University of Lyon to study overseas and pursue my dream of an international career. My future was bright and full of promise. I was at the men's alumni rugby game with the women's rugby team, and I made one really poor decision that day. I got into the backseat of a car and I failed to put my seatbelt on. We were headed down this street in Eugene, and nobody in my car had been drinking, but there was a car coming down 23rd, and the driver of that car had been drinking. He would later tell police that he never saw the stop sign. He ran the stop sign, broadsided the car in which I was riding, and I was thrown out and run over by a 3,000-pound vehicle. I remember a flash, and I remember being out on the ground, and I remember thinking to myself, where am I? Am I on the rugby field? Have I just been tackled? And then I started to push against the ground, tried to get up. My friend Lisa yelled at me. She said, T, stay down. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to stay down. I certainly can't get up. The next thing I remember was being put into the ambulance. The girl next to me was screaming her head off. And I turned to the ambulance driver and I said, could you please shut her up? The last thing I remember on May 14th, 1988 was being taken to a big white room. And somebody kept on screaming, please, please put me to sleep. You've got to put me to sleep. Please, don't make me stay awake for this. And as I lost consciousness, I realized that I was the one who was hurt, and I was the one who was screaming. I spent 8 hours in surgery that night. They had to transfuse my body with blood 2.5 times. I spent a month and 3 days in ICU in critical condition, and 3 months in the hospital that summer. When I finally left the hospital, it was in a wheelchair. I've told you the beginning of a story that goes on and on and on. To date, I've had 35 reconstructive surgeries, and it took me 4 years to learn to walk again. And trust me when I tell you, learning to walk again twice creates for some very awkward family photo albums. So, what's my disability? Well, my trauma nurse would tell you that I have severe traumatic, lower extremity, orthopedic, and vascular injuries with extensive soft tissue damage. Say that 3 times fast. I refer to myself as an orthopedic injury or walking wounded. It would take me 3 weeks to realize how badly that I'd been injured and that my life was never, ever going to be the same. It would take me 2 years to realize that now, by virtue of my disability, I was a second-class citizen. Not because there wasn't some landmark civil rights law protecting me, but because of the way people viewed me and how they treated me. As a person with a disability, I was no longer expected to live the same life as my able-bodied counterparts. As a matter of fact, no one but my mother had any expectations of me at all. In 1988, when I became disabled, approximately 16% of people with disabilities earned their post-secondary degrees. We had twice the unemployment rate as the able-bodied population. And then if you counted all the people with disabilities no longer looking for work, that went up to 70%. The Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. Today, we have 10 times the accommodation. We have all these laws promoting employment for people with disabilities. It is 26 years later, and those statistics are virtually identical, at a cost of $260 billion a year to the American taxpayer. So, if it's not rights and it's not accommodations, what is it? It's attitudes. And it's not just the attitudes of able-bodied people, it's also the attitudes of people with disabilities. Together, we have created a culture of fear and shame around disability. When I was in my wheelchair, people would come up to me and they'd be like, "It's so great to see you out of the house." Can you imagine if people thought the greatest achievement for the rest of your life was going to be getting out of the house? How demotivating is that? And by those standards, we are all in line for a Nobel Prize today. It's so great to see you all out of the house. Isn't it great we are all out of the house together? Woo! So today I want to redefine disability for you because this physical limitation, this limitation that everyone thinks is my disability, has never ever held me back. There's a word in the disability lexicon and it's a bad word. We're not supposed to use it. But I think it's a perfectly good word and I think we can repurpose it. And that word is handicap. I meet people who are handicapped all the time and it has nothing to do with any physical or mental limitation or any definition of disability. It has everything to do with their attitude and who they choose to be in this life. So for me, a true disability, a handicap, it's the things we tell ourselves that keep us from being and bringing our very best self every single day. It's the scripts we have in our mind that keep us from pursuing our goals and dreams and what we really truly want in this life. There is a huge difference between what we are capable of doing and what we allow ourselves to do. And then there's a second definition, and that's what we do to other people. When we handicap people with our attitudes and our assumptions about their abilities. When we see someone in a wheelchair and we think their greatest achievement for the rest of their life is going to be getting out of the house, we're handicapping them. So I was on the bus one day and I was sitting in the handicap section, because I can. And this woman gets on and she has her walker. And she looks at me and she says, "I'm going to need that seat." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, then you better preface that with a please and end with a thank you." And you could feel all the able-bodied people on the bus were like this. They were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe she spoke to that poor disabled woman that way." Why not? I wouldn't accept that behavior from an able-bodied person. Why would I accept it from a person with a disability? I used to work on employment for people with disabilities. And occasionally my boss would get a complaint. And when that happened, it was always my fault. And he was right, it was my fault. Because how dare I have expectations of these poor, poor people? How dare I expect them to answer their phone, show up at employment events, be on time? How dare he not? How dare you not? Anytime we allow people with disabilities to behave in a way that's unacceptable for able-bodied people to behave, that's called a pity pass. And it's far more handicapping than any mental or physical limitation. Inclusion of people with disabilities in our society is a 50-50 equation. People with disabilities need to step up to the plate, and able-bodied people need to let them. As Americans, the only thing that we are entitled to is the same opportunities as everyone else. And a lot of times you're not even going to get that. So I ask you to change your attitude about people with disabilities. Don't assume that we live different lives. People with disabilities don't need your pity, they don't need your charity. What they need, and what I'm asking from you today, is for your solidarity. We cannot legislate the inclusion of people with disabilities into our society, we have to educate it. And we cannot solve the problem of education and employment for people with disabilities and this $260 billion price tag until we solve the problem of inclusion. Don't assume that we live different lives than you. When you see an able-bodied person out grocery shopping, you don't run up and you're not like, "Can I help with your groceries? Can I push your cart? Can I help you load your groceries in the car?" No, so why do you do it to a person with a disability? We're perfectly capable of asking for help, and it's perfectly okay for you to let us. You want to start a conversation with someone with a disability? Rather than sliding up and being like, "Hey, you know I had a knee injury once." Why don't you try like, "How's your day going? What do you do for work?" Allow people with disabilities to earn their own reputations. Watch the Paralympics. That will change your perspective like that. Rio 2016, September 7th through the 18th. Most importantly, have expectations. We should expect everyone in our society to contribute to the very best of their abilities, no matter what those abilities are. All my life, ever since I turned 25, I've been an overachiever. I keep trying to prove to you that I am worthy of first-class American citizenship, that I have talents and abilities that I bring and that I can contribute to our society. Today, I ask you to endeavor to change your attitude, to quit handicapping people with disabilities by focusing on their limitations rather than their abilities. The truth is, this is me. I've been disabled for 28 years. That's longer than I was ever able-bodied. I'm over it, and it's okay if you get over it too.